Lucy Carter guided a professional basketball player through his knee recovery exercises in the rehabilitation center where the morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows. She worked as a physical therapist specializing in sports rehabilitation at Prime Recovery Therapy Center and had built a reputation for helping athletes return to their peak condition. Her smartphone buzzed, displaying a message from her husband, Michael. "Don't forget dinner at Mom's Gallery tonight. It's the final meeting for Bethany's engagement party." Lucy's shoulders tensed as she read the message. Since marrying Michael Carter 5 years ago, her relationship with her mother-in-law, Deborah, had been a constant struggle. Deborah Carter was a former high school art teacher who now owned an exclusive gallery in Chicago's art district. For her, her son's marriage to a physical therapist from a working-class background had been a crushing disappointment. Since the pandemic, Lucy's caseload had tripled with injured athletes. But Deborah and Michael's sister Bethany consistently dismissed her profession as just moving people's arms and legs around. Additionally, not having children was another constant source of Deborah's sharp disapproval. She never missed an opportunity to mention the importance of continuing the Carter legacy during their conversations. When they arrived at Deborah's gallery in the refined arts district, Bethany's silver Mercedes was already parked outside. In the consultation area, surrounded by expensive paintings, Deborah and Bethany were huddled together, their voices low and intense. "Finally, you're here," Deborah said, her smile as cold as winter rain. "Where's Michael?" he said. "The audit will run late tonight. Should we start without him?" Bethany was preparing for her engagement party to James Whitaker next month. James was a vice president at an investment bank. And for Deborah, this relationship represented a chance to elevate the family's social standing in Chicago's elite circles. "We were finalizing the guest list for the party," Bethany said, running her manicured fingers through her perfectly styled hair. "You and Michael will be seated with the family naturally. Let me know if there's anything I can help with," Lucy offered, trying to bridge the gap. "Thank you. But we have everything under control," Bethany replied curtly. "My connections in the art world are handling the arrangements. You just need to show up and look presentable." The conversation flowed around wedding details, with Lucy sitting silently, her input never requested or valued. The gallery walls displayed the Carter family's achievements and photographs, but Lucy and Michael's wedding photo was relegated to a small corner barely visible. Michael arrived, kissed Lucy's cheek, and settled beside her with an apologetic look. As evening approached, the discussion turned to the Whitaker family's influence and wealth in Chicago's financial sector. "By the way, Lucy," Deborah suddenly turned to her with calculating eyes. "Could we count on a bit more financial support this month? There are some additional expenses for Bethany's party." Lucy and Michael had been providing monthly assistance to Deborah since Michael's father passed away. This money was crucial for maintaining Deborah's gallery and her lifestyle in the arts community. As they prepared to leave, Felicia, Deborah's personal assistant, quietly approached Lucy. "Mrs. Carter, about tomorrow's venue walkthrough, what time should the catering staff expect you to arrive?" Lucy looked puzzled. "The catering staff? I'm a guest, Felicia." Felicia's face flushed with embarrassment. "I apologize, ma'am. I misunderstood." Once in the car, Lucy felt the familiar weight of always being treated as an outsider pressing down on her chest. What kind of humiliation would she face at Bethany's upcoming engagement party? Based on 5 years of similar experiences, she couldn't allow herself to hope for better treatment. Still, for Michael's sake, she needed to maintain her composure and dignity. On the day of Bethany's engagement party, brilliant sunshine bathed the Art Institute of Chicago in the city's cultural district. Lucy had been anxious since morning, but Michael's reassuring words helped calm her nerves. "Today is Bethany's special day. Let's celebrate with them," Lucy told herself as she styled her hair in front of the mirror. She had chosen a simple yet elegant navy dress, carefully avoiding anything that might draw Deborah's criticism. "You look beautiful." Michael placed his hands on her shoulders and smiled at her reflection. "Let's go. Mom will be upset if we're late." When they arrived at the museum, the parking area was filled with expensive cars. While Michael parked, Lucy took a deep breath to steel herself. She knew her relationship with her in-laws was strained, but she hoped for a peaceful evening. Walking through the marble column entrance, they headed to the party reception. At the check-in desk, adorned with white orchids, several staff members greeted guests with professional smiles. Mr. and Mrs. Carter, Michael announced, and the receptionist consulted her list. Mr. Michael, welcome to tonight's celebration. But when Lucy looked for her name on the guest list, her heart sank. Her name wasn't there. I'm sorry, the receptionist said apologetically, but I don't see Lucy Carter on our VIP list. There must be a mistake. Lucy's voice wavered. Michael was still greeting other guests, unaware of the situation. Is there a problem? Deborah's voice cut through the air like ice. She appeared wearing an elegant silver gown, her expression coldly satisfied. Deborah, my name isn't on the guest list, Lucy said, fighting to stay composed. Deborah glanced at the list with mock surprise. Oh dear, you weren't included in the family section. You can join the general attendees if you'd like. The words hit Lucy like a physical blow. Nearby guests turned to stare, their expressions mixing curiosity with disdain. Lucy's face burned with shame, but she refused to let tears fall. What's happening? Michael finally noticed and approached them. I'll fix this immediately. No, Michael, Lucy said quietly. Today is Bethany's day. Let's not make a scene. She accepted the general admission wristband, her silent act of defiance. Michael's face flushed with anger, but he stayed quiet when Lucy squeezed his hand firmly. A sensible choice, Deborah murmured. Now let's proceed to the reception. James's parents are expecting us. Deborah glided away gracefully, leaving Lucy and Michael behind. This is unbelievable, Michael muttered through clenched teeth. I'm confronting Mom right now. Not tonight. Lucy took his arm. This isn't the time for confrontation. We'll discuss it later. The ceremony in the sculpture gallery was elegantly conducted. Bethany, wearing a stunning cocktail dress, radiated joy. James's face glowed with genuine love. But Lucy's heart felt heavy with hurt. She could feel Deborah's cold stare tracking her throughout the evening. After the ceremony, guests moved to the museum's grand ballroom for dinner. Elegantly arranged tables displayed place cards for each guest. Lucy and Michael were directed to the VIP family table and sat down. Are you holding up okay? Michael whispered. Yes. She managed a weak smile. I'm trying not to let it affect me. Their table included Deborah James's parents, Thomas and Victoria Whitaker, and several close relatives. The engaged couple sat at the head table and toasts began. After the speeches, servers started bringing out the first course. As gourmet appetizers were placed before each guest, Lucy noticed something troubling. No plate appeared at her place setting. Excuse me, Lucy quietly stopped a passing server. Where's my dinner? The server looked uncomfortable. I apologize, but those were my instructions. Michael started to rise angrily, but Bethany called him over to the head table. At that moment, Lucy sat alone, burning with embarrassment and rage. You seem distressed. Bethany suddenly materialized beside Lucy. Her smile was cruel and calculating. Why are you treating me this way? Lucy asked in a low voice. Bethany leaned close and whispered viciously. Dinner is reserved for real family members. People like you don't qualify. That was Lucy's breaking point. Years of humiliation, subtle cruelty, and cold rejection crashed together in this single moment. Lucy slowly stood and placed her napkin on the table. The room gradually quieted as attention turned to her. If that's your position, then I don't belong here. Her voice was soft but unwavering. Across the table, Deborah opened her mouth to speak, but Lucy was beyond listening. She carefully removed the engagement ring Bethany had asked her to hold temporarily and placed it on the table. The diamond caught the light as it touched the white tablecloth. If I'm not family, then I'm leaving. Silence fell like a heavy curtain over the room. She could see Michael rushing back from the head table, but Lucy was already walking toward the exit. Lucy Michael's voice echoed behind her. Wait, it's just a misunderstanding. Deborah's voice carried unprecedented panic. "Please come back." But Lucy's steps never faltered. She held her spine straight, lifted her chin high, and walked out with complete dignity. Just before reaching the door, she glanced back once. Deborah's face had turned ashen white. Bethany stood frozen, speechless, and on Thomas and Victoria Whitaker's faces, especially Victoria's, there was unmistakable outrage. Lucy walked through the museum lobby and breathed deeply of the cool night air. Her heart ached, but she also felt an unexpected sense of freedom. She had finally escaped the anger and shame she'd carried for too long. As she prepared to call a taxi, she heard footsteps approaching. Turning, she saw James's mother, Victoria, hurrying toward her. "Please wait." Victoria gently touched her arm. "What happened in there is absolutely inexcusable." Deborah and Bethany's behavior. "I have no words." Lucy smiled through her unshed tears. "Thank you, Victoria, but I need to go home. I can't stay any longer." "I completely understand," Victoria nodded. "But please know that you handled yourself with remarkable strength and grace." Those words allowed Lucy to smile genuinely for the first time that evening. She hailed a taxi and headed home. After Lucy left, heavy tension settled over the museum venue. Michael returned from the head table and saw Bethany's engagement ring sitting abandoned. His expression darkened immediately. "What happened? Where's Lucy?" he demanded urgently. Deborah attempted to mask her panic with a strained smile. "Just a small misunderstanding, Michael. She'll return shortly." However, James's mother, Victoria, interrupted with an icy voice. "It wasn't a misunderstanding. I witnessed everything you and Bethany did to Lucy." Michael's eyes blazed with fury. He noticed the general admission wristband on the table and understood. At that moment, his expression shifted from anger to pure rage. "What have you done?" His voice had lost all warmth. Why wasn't Lucy served dinner? Why was she excluded from the family section? James stood beside Bethany, beginning to grasp the situation. "What's happening here?" "Bethany." Bethany's face flushed as she started making excuses. "It was just a harmless joke, James." She overreacted completely. A joke. James's voice was filled with disbelief. "Excluding someone from dinner and treating them like a stranger is your idea of humor." Throughout the venue, guests began murmuring among themselves. Word would spread quickly through Chicago's social circles. James's father, Thomas, rose slowly and fixed Deborah with a stern gaze. "This behavior is absolutely unacceptable." His voice carried quiet authority. "We value family unity and mutual respect. We cannot associate with a family that treats people so cruelly." Victoria stood beside her husband and nodded firmly. "Our support for this engagement is temporarily withdrawn. We cannot proceed under these circumstances." Bethany's face went white with shock. "But this is my moment." James took his fiancée's hand, but spoke with cold determination. "Bethany, if this reflects your true character, we need to seriously reevaluate our future together." Michael was beyond listening to explanations. He clutched the wristband and declared, "I'm going to find Lucy," before storming out. Outside, museum staff were helping Lucy into a taxi. Michael sprinted to the parking garage and jumped into his car. Gripping the steering wheel tightly, he raced home while mentally rehearsing his apologies. When Lucy reached home, she hesitated at the front door. This house represented her love with Michael, but now doubt clouded her heart. She unlocked the door, entered the quiet space, collapsed on the sofa, and wept silently. 20 minutes later, the front door burst open. Michael rushed in, breathing heavily. "Lucy," his voice calling her name carried deep anguish and worry. Lucy looked up and fresh tears fell at the sight of her husband. Michael sat beside her and pulled her into his embrace. "Mom and Bethany's actions are inexcusable," he said quietly. "You're the most precious person in my world. I'm devastated by their behavior." Lucy felt fragile in her husband's protective arms. "Why am I still an outsider after 5 years of marriage? You're not an outsider. Michael lifted her face gently. You are my family, my everything. Mom and Bethany's prejudices aren't mine. They held each other as darkness fell outside, the room filled with evening shadows. Finally, Lucy whispered, "What happens now?" Michael responded with unwavering resolve. "First, I'm immediately stopping all financial support to Mom. I won't enable her lifestyle anymore." Lucy stared at her husband in amazement. Really? But Deborah Mom must face the consequences of her choices, Michael said firmly. She has enough resources. She simply can't maintain that gallery and social status. Lucy nodded slowly. Her wounded heart still ached, but her husband's convictions strengthened her spirit. What about our relationship with them? She asked carefully. We need distance until they genuinely reflect and apologize. Michael squeezed her hand. They sat quietly planning their future together. Despite the pain and anger, new resolve was taking root. Michael suggested hesitantly, "How about a weekend retreat, just us? I know a beautiful inn on the Michigan coast." Lucy's first genuine smile appeared. "That sounds perfect. We need time for ourselves." Throughout the night, their phones rang constantly. Calls came from Deborah, Bethany, and even James, but they ignored them all. They needed space to heal. The next morning, Michael called the bank to cancel automatic transfers to his mother's account. Lucy contacted her workplace to request a few days off. Her supervisor was understanding, saying, "You've always supported everyone else. Now it's time to focus on yourself." Desperate messages kept arriving from Deborah, but Michael sent only one brief text. "We need space. Your and Bethany's behavior was inexcusable. Lucy is my wife and my family. If you can't accept that, we must reconsider our relationship." While packing their bags, Lucy gazed out the window. Morning sunlight bathed the garden flowers, heralding a fresh start. Yesterday's shame and hurt remained in her heart, but she also felt an unexpected sense of freedom. "I'm ready." Michael placed his hand on her shoulder. Lucy turned with a smile. "Yes, let's go." As they left the house, they found a letter in the mailbox. It was from James. Lucy opened it in the car and they read it together. "I deeply apologized for last night's events. I was appalled by Bethany's family's behavior. Our engagement is currently suspended. My parents have decided we cannot proceed under these circumstances. I've told Bethany she must seriously examine herself. Lucy, I admire your dignified response. Safe travels. James Whitaker." They finished reading in contemplative silence. Michael started the car and drove toward the Michigan coast. A week passed. Lucy and Michael spent peaceful time by the lake mending their emotional wounds. As they enjoyed a relaxed breakfast at their small coastal inn, Michael's phone rang again. The screen showed his mom calling. Michael hesitated briefly but declined the call. Deborah, Lucy asked, watching the tranquil waves outside their window. Yes, Michael sipped his coffee. That's the 12th call since yesterday. I've gotten multiple messages from Bethany too. Lucy showed her phone. The screen displayed unread texts from Bethany. Lucy, please call me. I'm genuinely sorry. They continued breakfast in comfortable silence. Lake breezes drifted through the window, gently moving the sheer curtains. They might need more time, Michael said quietly, to determine if they're truly repentant or just want things back to normal. Lucy took her husband's hand. I support your judgment, but we can't avoid them indefinitely. I know. Michael sighed deeply. It's just that, remembering that night. On their final vacation day, as they prepared to return home, Michael came back from checking out with a puzzled expression. What's wrong? Lucy asked. The innkeeper mentioned an interesting newspaper article. He opened the paper he was carrying. The Whitaker family has announced a charitable foundation. They're creating a fund to support physical therapists. Lucy took the newspaper with surprise. The article described how James's parents had established a foundation supporting physical therapists who had worked tirelessly during the pandemic. In an interview, Victoria Whitaker stated, We want to create a society that honors real heroes and values their contributions." "Is this because of me?" Lucy whispered. Michael placed his hand on her shoulder. "I can't say for certain, but the timing suggests." They quietly loaded their luggage and drove home. Upon arriving, several letters waited in their mailbox. Among them were James's official engagement postponement notice and a personal apology letter from the Whitaker family to Lucy. 3 weeks after resuming normal life, Lucy had returned to her duties at the rehabilitation center. Her colleagues noticed a subtle transformation in her. She displayed greater confidence and more assertive leadership. One weekday evening, as Lucy finished her shift and walked to the parking lot, she spotted a familiar car. Deborah Carter was waiting beside it. Gone was her usual polished appearance. She looked simply dressed and visibly exhausted. "Lucy." Deborah's voice shook. "Could we speak for a moment?" Lucy stopped and studied her mother-in-law. The once proud figure had vanished. Deborah now appeared small and vulnerable. "All right," Lucy agreed quietly. They entered a cafe near the rehabilitation center. Deborah ordered coffee but left it untouched. "My behavior was inexcusable," Deborah said through tears. "I was consumed by pride and prejudice. I never tried to see who you really are, how valuable you are." Lucy listened silently, trying to gauge the sincerity in Deborah's words. "Have you heard from the Whitaker family?" Deborah asked. "Yes, from James and his parents." Deborah smiled bitterly. "They've severed all contact with us. James told Bethany he'd reconsider only if she genuinely changes." "What about Bethany?" "She's soul-searching too," Deborah replied wearily. For the first time, she's considering how her actions impact others. Silence settled between them. Outside the cafe window, people hurried past on their evening commutes. "I'm selling my gallery," Deborah suddenly revealed. "Without Michael's support, I can't sustain that lifestyle. I'm planning to move to a modest apartment." Lucy was startled by Deborah's transformation. She had once prioritized social status above everything. Now she was embracing a simpler existence. Deborah Lucy chose her words carefully. "I might be able to forgive you, but rebuilding trust will take time." Deborah nodded. "I understand completely. I'm just asking Michael and you for a chance. I want to change." That evening, Lucy shared her conversation with Michael. He listened thoughtfully and finally nodded. "Let's meet with Mom," he decided. "But I'll make clear that our relationship can't return to what it was before." The following weekend, Lucy and Michael visited Deborah's new apartment. Compared to her previous gallery space, it was remarkably modest. Deborah welcomed them warmly and had prepared a homemade lunch. "You cooked yourself?" Michael asked in amazement. He had never seen his mom in the kitchen. "Yes," Deborah answered, slightly embarrassed. "I'm learning from YouTube. I'm not skilled, but I'm practicing." The conversation started awkwardly, but gradually became more natural. Deborah discussed her recent experiences and acknowledged how warped her values had been. "I've always judged people by wealth and status," she confessed honestly, but now I see how hollow that was. Lucy observed her mother-in-law's transformation. It didn't appear superficial. Something fundamental was shifting. "What about Bethany?" Michael asked. "She's struggling too," Deborah answered. "James has given her time, but she understands she must genuinely change." Before leaving, Deborah handed Lucy a small box. "Open it," she said quietly. When Lucy opened the box, inside was a beautiful silver bracelet. It was engraved with the words, "Family is bound by love, not blood." "I still have much to learn," Deborah said, "but I want to truly acknowledge that you are my family, Lucy." From that day forward, their relationship gradually improved. Michael partially resumed financial support to Deborah, but limited to basic necessities, not the unconditional aid of before. Deborah accepted this and tried adapting to a simpler life. A month later, Bethany came to meet Lucy directly. For the first time, her former arrogance was gone, and she apologized sincerely. "I will regret that night for the rest of my life." Bethany said, I've realized my own shallowness. I don't ask for forgiveness. I just want to change. Lucy smiled gently. People can change, Bethany. Both you and I. As autumn deepened, all family members agreed to receive counseling and work on building healthy relationships. The first session was tense, but it was a necessary process. One evening, Lucy and Michael were sitting on their porch watching the sunset. The wind rustled the trees and golden leaves danced downward. I never imagined, Lucy said, resting her head on Michael's shoulder, that such a humiliating night would bring about such change. Michael embraced his wife. It's because you stood up courageously. Your strength changed everything. They silently watched the sunset. The future remained uncertain, but today they had taken a definite step forward. One Sunday a year later, a small barbecue party was held in Lucy and Michael's backyard. Lucy, arranging final decorations on the garden table, placed her hand on her slightly swollen belly. 6 months pregnant, she and Michael were eagerly awaiting their first child. "Don't carry heavy things," Deborah called out worriedly, taking the fruit platter from her hands. "Leave it to me." Deborah had changed remarkably over the past year. She had adapted to living in a modest apartment and volunteered 2 days a week at Lucy's rehabilitation center. She listened to patients and for the first time devoted time to people other than herself. "Thank you, Deborah." Lucy smiled. Their relationship wasn't completely healed, but a new bond based on mutual respect was developing. Bethany and James had married in a small ceremony 6 months earlier. Unlike her previous desire for grandeur, this was a heartfelt ceremony with only close friends and family. Bethany had abandoned her sense of superiority, approaching her relationship with James more humbly. "How's the baby?" Bethany sat beside Lucy and asked gently. "Very active, especially loves to kick at night." Lucy laughed. Michael, grilling steaks, watched this scene with deep satisfaction. The sight of his mother and sister genuinely connecting with his wife was once unimaginable. "How about a toast to healthy family relationships?" James suggested, raising his glass. Everyone raised their glasses and said in unison, "To healthy family relationships." Lucy's glass contained non-alcoholic sparkling cider. After the meal, Deborah handed Lucy a small gift. It was a hand-knitted baby blanket. "I made it myself," Deborah said, slightly embarrassed. "It's not perfect, but I put my heart into it." Lucy was moved and hugged her mother-in-law. "It's beautiful. Thank you." As evening approached, soft twilight enveloped the garden. Michael sat beside his wife and wrapped his arm around her shoulders. Looking back, "That engagement party was a turning point for all of us," Lucy said quietly. Michael nodded. "Sometimes painful events create the greatest growth." Deborah overheard their conversation from across the table. She smiled softly, preparing to welcome her first grandchild while carrying lessons learned from past mistakes. "I finally understand what real family means," Deborah said quietly. "It's not bound by blood, but by mutual respect and love." As the first stars appeared in the night sky, they talked and laughed together. Lucy had overcome her painful past and discovered stronger confidence and self-worth. The entire family had grown from that difficult experience. A new chapter was opening before them. It might not be a perfect story, but it was more beautiful, built on truth and dignity. Lucy Carter learns the power of standing up for her dignity in the face of rejection and humiliation from her in-laws. Through the painful experience at Bethany's engagement party, she realizes that true family is defined by love and respect, not blood or social status. By walking away with grace and refusing to accept mistreatment, Lucy catalyzes change in her family, prompting reflection and growth in Deborah and Bethany. Her courage to prioritize self-worth over approval teaches her that enduring pain can lead to personal empowerment and stronger, more authentic relationships built on mutual respect.
I slid onto the white-painted wooden chair, its familiar creak echoing through the kitchen I'd once called home. The air hung thick with the scent of pot roast and garlic bread, curling around me like a warm memory. Across the table sat my parents, Robert and Susan, their faces etched with lines I swore weren't there last year. My twin brothers, Ethan and Jacob, sprawled in their seats, all lanky limbs and restless energy at 25. The table was simple, chipped plates, a faded tablecloth. But it was ours. Or it used to be. Tonight, the clatter of forks felt too loud, the dim light from the overhead bulb too harsh. I speared a piece of roast, the juices pooling on my plate, and let the aroma pull me back. Family dinners, they'd been my anchor, Friday nights with Mom's cooking, Dad's quiet grumbles about work, the boys bickering over the last roll. I'd sit there, the eldest at 32, soaking it in, believing this was where I belonged. But tonight, something shifted. Ethan's smirk caught my eye, sharp and knowing. Jacob leaned back, arms crossed, his gaze flickering with something I couldn't place. My stomach tightened. Susan cleared her throat, her voice slicing through the haze, carefully composed. "Victoria, we want to talk to you about an important decision." I set my fork down, its metal cool against my fingers. Robert straightened, his tone steady but lacking its usual warmth. "We've finalized our will, and we want you to hear it from us now so there's no confusion later." Confusion? My pulse quickened, a dull thud in my ears. I glanced at Mom, her hands twisting the edge of her napkin, then at Dad, his jaw tight. The boys watched me, Ethan's grin widening, Jacob's eyes glinting. The pot roast turned sour in my mouth. This wasn't just dinner. It was a reckoning. I swallowed hard, the weight of their stares pinning me to the chair. Whatever came next, I knew it'd change everything. And deep down, I wasn't sure I was ready. Ethan leaned back, crossing his arms over his chest, a smug smirk curling his lips. To put it simply, everything goes to us. The words hit like a slap, sharp and cold. I froze. What? Jacob repeated it, his tone light, like he was tossing out some casual fact. "Mom and Dad are leaving the house, the beach condo, all their assets to us. You get nothing." The room fell silent, save for the faint hum of traffic drifting in from the quiet suburban street outside. My fork clattered against the plate, a jarring sound that snapped me back. I turned to Mom, her face a mask of forced calm, waiting for her to deny it, to laugh it off as some cruel joke. But she only gave a small, firm nod. "We think this is for the best," she said, her voice tight, her fingers clutching that damn napkin like a lifeline. "You have a stable career, a solid income, but Ethan and Jacob, they're still finding their way. They need more support." Support? Pain surged through my chest, hot and jagged, twisting with a rising anger I couldn't choke down. I'd paid over half their mortgage for years, covered medical bills when Dad's insurance fell short, sent cash to Ethan every time he flunked a semester, to Jacob when he needed a new laptop for his latest scheme. And now this? I turned to Dad, desperate for a crack in his resolve, some hint of hesitation. But he just stared at his water glass, avoiding me, his silence louder than any words. "So, after everything I've done, you've decided I don't deserve anything?" My voice wavered, despite my grip on the table's edge, the wood biting into my palms. I couldn't hide the hurt, raw and spilling out. Mom sighed, her eyes narrowing with that familiar disappointment. "Victoria, you always make everything about money." I clenched my hands under the table, nails digging into my skin. "It's not about money," I said, forcing my voice steady, though it shook at the edges. "It's about fairness, about how I've always been there when you needed me. But now, just because I don't lean on you, I'm nothing to this family?" Ethan let out a short, barking laugh, shaking his head. "You're being dramatic. No one forced you to help. You just liked playing the martyr." Jacob chuckled, amusement flickering in his eyes. "Maybe you thought if you threw enough cash our way, Mom and Dad would finally love you as much as they love us." His words landed like a punch, stealing my breath. I looked to my parents, waiting for them to correct him, to call out his cruelty. Nothing. They sat there, mute, and in that silence, I understood. I wasn't their daughter, I was their bank, and they'd just cashed me out. Jacob's laugh still echoed in my skull as I stared at them, Mom's pinched lips, Dad's averted eyes, Ethan's smug tilt of the head. The air in the kitchen thickened, the scent of pot roast now cloying, meaningless. Pain swelled in my throat, a lump I couldn't swallow. I took a deep breath, steadying myself against the storm inside. "All right," I said, my voice even, though my heart pounded like a drum. "If that's your decision, then I have one of my own." Ethan raised an eyebrow, smirking. "Oh, and what's that?" I didn't answer him. I pushed my chair back, the scrape against the linoleum a jagged farewell. I stood, legs trembling but firm, and turned away from the table. Their faces blurred behind me, triumphant, stunned, silent. I walked toward the door, each step heavier than the last, the warmth of childhood dinners fading with every breath. No one stopped me, no one called my name. The door clicked shut, a sound so final it cut through the night. Outside, the crisp air stung my cheeks, a sharp contrast to the heat pulsing at my temples. I climbed into my car, hands shaking on the wheel. The radio stayed off. I needed the silence, craved it. Driving home, the suburban streets stretched endless and empty, headlights slicing through the dark. Why was I even surprised? Hadn't I always known, deep down, that I was their financial safety net, nothing more? For over a decade, I'd poured myself into them. Money, time, every ounce of care I had. And they'd taken it, every dime, then tossed me aside like an empty wrapper. Back in my apartment, I collapsed onto the couch, the cushions sinking under me. My hands still trembled as I unlocked my phone. The screen's glow harsh against the dim room. Their words replayed, cutting deeper with each loop. Ethan's taunt. "You liked playing the martyr," Jacob's jab. "Maybe you thought money would make them love you." And my parents' silence, the loudest betrayal of all. I'd done everything right, worked late nights, skipped vacations, sent checks when they called crying about bills. For what? To be erased from their future? The realization burned, bitter and clear. They didn't need me. They never had. Not as a daughter, not as Victoria, just as a paycheck. And I was done being that. The apartment felt different that night, smaller somehow, but mine. The couch creaked as I shifted, staring at my phone. The banking app glared back, numbers stark and unyielding. $1,900 every month to Mom and Dad for the mortgage. $1,200 more whenever Ethan or Jacob whined about rent or car payments. My heartbeat thudded in my ears, a steady rhythm of rage and exhaustion. I'd accepted this burden for years, called it duty, responsibility. But this was their choice. They'd made that clear at dinner. No one forced me to keep it up. My finger hovered over the screen. 1 second. 2. I pressed cancel. A notification popped up, cold and final. Recurring payments successfully stopped. A wave crashed over me. Anger, bitterness, but something else too. Relief, sharp and sudden, like a weight slipping off my shoulders. I set the phone down, sinking deeper into the couch, letting the silence settle. For the first time in a decade, I wasn't carrying them. Sleep didn't come. I lay awake, replaying the years, the vacations I'd skipped to cover their bills, the overtime I'd worked to fund Ethan's latest major switch, Jacob's influencer dreams, sacrifices I'd made, believing they mattered. But when I'd needed just one sign, one nod that I was enough, they'd given me nothing. The next morning, my phone buzzed relentlessly. Mom. I hesitated, then answered. "Victoria, did you cancel this month's payment?" Susan's voice was sharp, worry masked with that old disappointment. I took a deep breath. "Yes, Mom, because I realized I don't have to do this anymore." Silence stretched. heavy. "What do you mean?" she snapped. "Family supports each other. You know we rely on that money for the bills." I clenched my jaw, keeping my voice steady. "Mom, family only matters to you when I'm paying for it. I've helped for years, but I still don't mean anything to you." Her tone rose, accusing. "You're being selfish, Victoria. Why are you acting this way, just because of the will? Everything isn't about money." I laughed, dry and hollow. "Not about money. I've been the one keeping this family afloat. If it's not about money, why don't you ask Ethan and Jacob to step up?" More silence. I could see her face in my mind, angry, cornered. "I can't believe you're acting like this," she finally said, cold. "This isn't the Victoria I raised." I closed my eyes, the weight in my chest shifting. "Mom, this is me. But you never really saw me." I hung up before she could reply, my thumb trembling over the screen. No tears, just clarity. I wasn't their ATM anymore, and for once that felt right. 2 days later, I trudged up the stairs to my apartment, the weight of work clinging to me like damp clothes. My key hovered over the lock, but something was wrong. The door wouldn't budge. I pressed my hand against the frame, fingers brushing a hard, cold surface. Industrial foam, sealing every crack, the handle encased in a solid, gray mass. My heartbeat slammed in my ears. This wasn't an accident. Someone had locked me out of my own home. I stepped back, breath shallow, and grabbed my phone. The hallway security camera app loaded slowly, too slowly. I fast-forwarded through the footage, eyes scanning the grainy blur, until there he was, Jacob, hunched in a hoodie and baseball cap, his stride unmistakable. He held a spray can, smirking as he filled the gaps, deliberate, spiteful. My hands trembled, rage boiling up my spine. This wasn't just anger. It was retaliation. A line crossed into something darker. Without hesitation, I dialed the police. They arrived within the hour, flashlights cutting through the dim hall. I handed over the footage, my voice steady despite the fire in my chest. "That's my brother, Jacob Miller. He did this." An officer watched the clip, nodding slowly. "Do you want to press charges, Ms. Williams?" I gripped my phone tighter, the chill of the foam still on my fingertips. If I let this go, it'd escalate. Jacob wouldn't stop. I met the officer's gaze, firm. "Yes, I want him held accountable." They took my statement, the foam's chemical stink lingering as they pried at the door. I stood there, watching, the reality sinking in. My family wasn't just cutting me out. They were fighting back, claws out. Jacob's stunt wasn't a prank. It was a message. But I wasn't the sister who'd roll over anymore. I'd given them everything, money, time, my sanity, and they'd thrown it back in my face. Now, they'd face consequences, not me. As the police left, promising updates, I exhaled. The anger settling into something colder, sharper. This was war, and I wasn't backing down. The next day, my phone buzzed with a call from Dad. I ignored it. Then Ethan, then Dad again. Finally, I picked up, bracing myself. "Victoria, your brother got called in by the police," Robert barked, his voice harsh, accusing. "How could you do this to your own family?" I leaned against my kitchen counter, the cool edge grounding me. "Jacob vandalized my apartment, Dad. He sealed my door shut. If he doesn't want charges, he can pay for the damages." His tone dropped, incredulous. "How much?" I didn't hesitate. $3,000. "How could you extort your own brother like this?" he snapped. I let out a dry chuckle, the sound brittle. "It's not extortion, Dad. It's consequences." He hung up, the line dead before I could say more. By morning, my account pinged. A $3,000 transfer attached to a note from Jacob. "I never want to see you again." I read it, felt nothing, and moved on. But the storm wasn't over. That afternoon, a message from my cousin popped up. "Victoria, is this true? People are saying you abandoned your family when they're struggling. I frowned, unease prickling my skin. Another text followed, from an old friend. How could you cut off your parents and brothers? They took care of you your whole life. I opened Facebook, and there it was, Mom's post, a long, tear-stained lie. She'd written that I'd turned my back on them in their time of need, that I was selfish, money-obsessed, leaving my aging parents and struggling brothers with nothing. Comments poured in, strangers offering sympathy, relatives vilifying me. So sad when kids forget where they came from, one wrote. Money's gone to her head, another sneered. Anger flared in my chest, hot and fierce. They'd twisted everything, omitted the mortgage I'd paid, the tuition I'd covered, Jacob's vandalism. I'd been their lifeline, not their villain. I sat in silence, weighing my options. Stay quiet, let them win the narrative. Number I'd taken their crap for too long. I opened my app, fingers flying as I typed. If my family wants to make this public, here's the truth. I laid it out. Every dollar I'd sent for 10 years, the $1,900 monthly mortgage, the cash for Ethan's cars, Jacob's schemes. I wrote about the will, the foam on my door, the police. I didn't turn my back on them, I finished. They never saw me as family unless I was paying. Now, I'm done. I hit post. Within hours, it exploded. Relatives messaging, shocked, asking questions. An aunt DM'd, "Did you really support them all those years?" Mom called, furious, her voice shaking. "Victoria, what the hell did you do?" I stayed calm, cool. "I told the truth, Mom. If you can tell your version, so can I." She sputtered, breathless. "You're humiliating us. Your father's ashamed to leave the house. Have you thought about Ethan and Jacob?" I gripped the phone tight. Did they think about me when Jacob trashed my home? When I was breaking my back for you all? Silence. Then, cold as ice. "You're destroying this family. Don't expect to come back." I took a deep breath. "Mom, you destroyed it, not me." I hung up, no regrets, just relief. After that call, they went silent. No more furious rants from Dad, no venomous texts from Ethan, no pleas from Mom. I'd lost them, or maybe I'd never had them. I blocked their numbers one by one, my thumb steady on the screen. The quiet that followed felt strange, unfamiliar, like a room I'd never stepped into. I set my phone down and walked to the balcony, the night breeze brushing my skin, cool and clean. The city hummed below, lights flickering, alive and indifferent. For the first time I breathed easy. Ethan's last text lingered in my mind. "You're a traitor." And Mom's parting shot, "You've changed." I whispered to myself, "No, I've just begun." The words settled, true and solid. I wasn't their doormat anymore, their endless ATM. I'd given them everything, money, years, pieces of myself, and they'd spat it back. Now, no more guilt trips, no late-night calls begging for cash. I was weightless, untethered, and it scared me how good it felt. I leaned against the railing, the metal cold under my palms, and thought about the house I'd grown up in. The kitchen, the pot roast dinners, they'd been a lie, a stage for their demands. I'd clung to that memory, thinking it meant love. But love doesn't drain you dry. They'd cut me from their will, their lives, expecting me to beg. Instead, they'd handed me freedom, raw and unasked for. I didn't need their approval, their crumbs of affection. I had me, Victoria, not their bank. The next morning, I woke to silence, no buzzing phone, no accusations. I made coffee, the drip steady, the mug warm in my hands. The apartment felt bigger, mine in a way it hadn't before. I glanced at the bank app, no transfers scheduled, no red numbers screaming debt. Just my money, my life. I stepped back onto the balcony, the sun rising over the skyline, painting it gold. This was it. My start, my rules. They'd let me go, or I'd let them go. Either way, I wasn't looking back. The breeze carried away the last of their hold, and I stood there, free. Weeks later, I booked a ticket to Italy. I'd dreamed of it forever. Florence's winding streets, the art, the air. But every time I'd saved up, Mom's voice would echo, "We need help with the bills." Not anymore. I landed in Florence, the plane's hum fading into a new rhythm. Cobblestones under my feet, espresso drifting from outdoor cafes. The city buzzed, alive, and I felt it too. A spark I hadn't known I'd lost. No one here needed me to pay their way. I was just Victoria, free to breathe. I wandered through narrow alleyways, past terracotta rooftops glowing in the sun. Museums swallowed my afternoons, Renaissance paintings I'd only seen in books, their colors pulling me in. One evening, I sat in a small cafe near Piazza della Signoria, sipping a cappuccino, the foam warm against my lips. A voice broke the quiet. "You seem to really like this place." I looked up, meeting warm brown eyes and a relaxed smile. He had light hair, a easy confidence. "Alex Carter," he said, pulling out a chair without asking. "I think I just fell in love with this city," I replied, smiling back, the words light on my tongue. We talked, hours slipping by unnoticed. He was 34, from New York, an interior designer obsessed with European architecture. His voice was calm, steady, sometimes laced with humor that made me laugh without effort. No pressure, no expectations, just two strangers connecting under an Italian sky. "This is my third time back," he said, grinning. I raised an eyebrow. "A loyal traveler, huh?" "Something like that," he shrugged, and I liked how simple it felt. The next few days blurred into a dream. Alex joined me at markets, haggling over trinkets, his laughter bright against the chatter. We sampled gelato, pistachio, tart, and sweet, walked the Arno River as the sunset painted it gold. He didn't ask about my past, my family. He saw me, not my burdens, and it hit me how rare that was. One night, on a rooftop terrace, the city lights glowed below, and I smiled to myself. I'd once thought happiness hinged on them, Mom, Dad, the boys. I'd given enough, I'd thought, to earn their love. But here, with pasta on my plate and wine in my glass, I knew better. Back home, work noticed. I'd thrown myself into a project, laser-focused, finishing it early. The promotion letter came a week after I returned, my new office overlooking the city through floor-to-ceiling windows. I stood there proud, no one to share it with but myself, and that was enough. Alex texted sometimes, casual. "Miss Florence yet?" I did, but I missed me there most, unburdened, alive. Italy hadn't just been a trip. It was proof I could build something new, something mine, and I wasn't letting go of that. Months passed, and whispers about my old family started filtering in. I was pouring coffee one morning, the steady drip filling my mug, when my phone buzzed. A text from Aunt Karen, Mom's cousin, flickered on the screen. "Victoria, I know you don't care about them anymore, but your parents are struggling. Robert's working night shifts at a warehouse. Susan's taking hourly cleaning jobs. They look exhausted." I paused, staring at the words, the steam curling up from my cup. I'd seen this coming. They'd leaned on me for years, never planning beyond my checks. Now, reality hit them hard. I set the phone down, no reply forming in my mind. A few days later, a friend mentioned Ethan had lost his job. Too many late nights, not enough effort. Jacob, still chasing his influencer dream, posted filtered photos but got nowhere, likes drying up. I wasn't surprised. They'd had every chance to stand on their own, to learn what I'd learned. Work, grit, survival. Instead, they'd banked on me, and when I walked away, their house of cards collapsed. I sipped my coffee, the bitterness sharp on my tongue, but I felt no guilt, no pull to fix it. Their decline wasn't my burden anymore. I'd carried them too long, pouring my life into theirs while they took without thanks. Now they faced the mess they'd made, and I stood apart, steady. The mug warmed my hands, the kitchen quiet except for the hum of the fridge. I'd built something here, my space, my peace, and they couldn't touch it. Karen's text lingered, a faint echo of their world, but it didn't pull me back. They'd chosen their path, just as I'd chosen mine, and I was done looking over my shoulder. Christmas loomed, and I'd once dreaded it, imagining an empty table, no calls from Mom, no chaos from Ethan and Jacob. But as December rolled in, I felt lighter. I decided to host, my apartment glowing with strung lights, the city twinkling beyond the balcony. Aunt Karen arrived first, her arms full of homemade cookies, their buttery scent mingling with pine from the small tree I'd set up. She hugged me tight, her voice soft against my ear. "I'm so proud of you, Victoria." I smiled, pouring her wine. "You are the only one who's ever said that." Friends trickled in, bringing laughter, bottles clinking, desserts piled high. The room buzzed with warmth. No forced chatter, no demands for cash to save the day. We ate, talked, the fire crackling in the corner, and I laughed more than I had in years of stiff family dinners. Karen caught my eye across the table, her gaze knowing. "I just wish they'd seen your worth before it was too late," she said, sipping her drink. I shrugged, the weight of her words soft now, not sharp. I don't need them to anymore. Later, as the clock struck midnight, I stepped onto the balcony, wine glass in hand. The city sprawled below, lights blinking like stars, the air crisp against my skin. I'd built this. Friends who stayed, a night that was mine. No invisible burdens dragging me down. Family wasn't blood, I realized, sipping the wine, its warmth spreading through me. It was love without strings, people who saw me, not my wallet. They'd cut me out thinking I'd crumble, but I'd found something better. Karen joined me, her coat pulled tight. "You're happy," she said, not a question. I nodded, the skyline glowing in my eyes. "Yeah, for me, not them." She squeezed my arm, and we stood there, the silence comfortable. This Christmas, my first without their shadow, wasn't lonely. It was full. Real. The laughter inside echoed out, a sound I'd earned. I'd let go, and it was the best gift I'd ever given myself, wrapped in lights and freedom. I sat in my armchair, wine glass cradled in my hands, the city lights reflecting off the window. Outside, cars hummed, people moved, the world spinning on, but in here, a stillness wrapped around me, soft and new. I'd once believed family was everything, blood, duty, sacrifice, no matter the cost. I'd told myself if I gave enough, emptied my pockets and my heart, they'd love me back, see me as more than their fix. But they never did, and that truth had carved me open. The will, the foam, the lies, they'd cut me out, a final stamp of my worth to them. Nothing, unless I paid. I'd thought it'd break me, leave me begging for their scraps. Instead, it freed me. I set the glass down, the clink sharp in the quiet. They'd handed me my life, raw and unshackled, and I'd taken it. No more late-night pleas, no guilt trips pulling me under. I could travel, laugh, breathe, choose me without apology. My eyes drifted to the phone, silent on the table, no missed calls, no echoes of their voices. Friends filled that space now, Karen's pride, Alex's easy smile from Florence. Family wasn't what I'd been born into, it was what I built, who stayed when I had nothing left to give. I stood, the room steady under my feet, and felt it. Power, mine alone. I'd been their bank, their crutch, but now I was Victoria, whole, free. The lights outside pulsed, alive like me, and I knew, sipping the last of my wine, this life was mine to live, not theirs to take.